Let's Get To presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Veerling's back. This game is turned upside down.
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair. All right, welcome to Go Astros. Here with me is Brian and Andy as usual. And gentlemen, the Astros are, 4-6? And so it seems to me that this is the best time to do our best William Shatner from Airplane 2 impression and shut the whole thing down, lest someone has a bobby pin. Brian, what were your impressions over this first 10 games, which still means, nothing?
I enjoyed the 4 wins better than the 6 losses. I know. I think
that wraps us up, guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they should win more games than they have so far. And
Andrew, how about you?
We bring you the hard-hitting analysis here on Go Astros.
this is why I'm the analytics guy.
Winning is better than losing, and so stop losing. Is my advice to Dusty Baker. He should play the winning lineup more than he plays the losing lineup.
One of the things, guys, that I have noticed about the team, and I think it's something that I guess for being 4-6, and if I were to be one who worried, to be less worried, is it seems like they are uncharacteristically losing games all kinds of ways. To me, it does feel like the team looks a little sluggish, a little, if you can, I did really identify that stuff from a distance. And it's also allowing us to see 1000% of the hypocrisy of just how short-sighted the average Twitter fan thinks about things. When it comes
hold on. That's an insult because I post my stuff on Facebook and they're just as short-sighted.
If not more so.
Oh no, they are. Yeah, we've moved beyond Facebook as incredible. They really are the worst. Not only can you find out which family member is racist, but the sports talk is awful. But Andy, I mean, really and truly, there have been games when the Astros have hit, and then the pitching has failed. And there's been games when the pitching has been dynamic. It just feels like they're just a little late getting slow, which isn't uncommon for this team.
We suffer from small sample size right now. So we're 10 games. There's 152 games to go in the worst case scenario. I look at it the opposite way. You're saying there's, they lose a bunch of different kind of ways. I think it's for 10 games, they have had part of their game not work, but it hasn't been a consistent part. Sometimes the first game, it was the bullpen blew a game that they wouldn't have normally blown. They've struck out more than they normally strike out because we're playing a lot of more younger players than we have in past years.
As pointed out on Brian's Substack.
Some days we hit really well. Some days we pitch really well. We've yet to do all facets of the game well in the same game. And I think that's just, again, if this 10-game stretch happens in June, I don't know anybody really notices. It just happens to be happening at the beginning of the season. And so it's highlighted. I'm encouraged just that you're getting contributions from players you might not have expected. Chas McCormick, which I assume we're going to talk about a little bit, from an OPS standpoint, at least, is your third best player on this team right now.
Right.
Mauricio Dubon's fourth, if that gives you any indication of how things are going. But you have Jose Abreu, who really hasn't gotten started, although he's hit in every game that he's played. Jeremy Pena has had the same struggles he experienced in the middle of the year last year. We don't have a clear idea of what's going on at catcher. And outside of, I think, one game, we've still been competitive in every game. It's not like we're getting blown out, and it's just the pieces aren't gelling yet. They will. There's too much talent on this team. And if we do nothing else, we're just going to get pieces back that make us better. At some point, we are going to get Lance McCullers Jr. back. At some point, we are going to get Jose Altuve back. At some point, we are going to get Michael Brantley back. And so some of these rookies who are playing, Mauricio Dubon's not going to have this playing time. It's just going to get better. So, yeah, it sucks. And I would much rather be watching winning games than games that are kind of frustrating. But it could be worse. We could be Pittsburgh and lose your best generational player for the season in game 10.
Yeah. It's funny too, Brian, I want your take on what Andy said, but also adding in that actually just looking at Baseball Reference, Mauricio Dubon's OPS right now is kind of more in line with many of the seasons of his career as opposed to last year, which was kind of an outlier. But overall, just your take on these first 10 games from a performance perspective of some of these guys that Andy mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, to get back to your original point, Jim, 10 baseball games is not a large sample. And so therefore, hey, you get a game in which, hey, are they striking out so much because they're intrinsically worse, or, they happen to just run against a good set of pitchers? I'll tell you more on Memorial Day to that, the answer to that. Some of that is, as Andy said, they're young players. Some of that is, hey, if you had Altuve and Brantley in there, they don't strike out a whole bunch.
Yeah.
So, it's just different for different things, but that's what happens with small sample baseball. And that includes, look, we know Alex Bregman is not this bad of a hitter. He's just having a slump.
And he usually starts slow again.
Yeah. And he's always started slow. And, why is that the case? If he knew, he wouldn't do the same thing, right? Because it's not like, it's not like Bregman doesn't grind through the off season. And, when does Bregman have a thought about other than baseball is a good question, right? He would figure this out if he could. It just happens, right? And so, yeah, it's an unpleasant 10 games. I'm really glad they won yesterday, because we'd be even angrier and ornerier today at 3-7 than we would be with a big, with a 3-game losing streak than we would be at 4-10. But, I think the one thing that is, I think, notable is they haven't gotten really good starting pitching until yesterday.
Right. Like they think they've had two examples. Obviously, Hunter Brown looked.
Yeah, it hasn't been awful, but it hasn't.
Fromber's second start was good, and he has the below 2 ERA. But you're right. We're used to pitchers going 7 innings, 6 innings, and we're getting less than 5 for most of our starts so far.
Yeah, and so we're getting more of the bullpen. And again, some of that will, again, through longer samples, and some of that is because the starters will build up to pitch more. And again, you saw Dusty getting back into midseason form yesterday by going to let Brown go for the 7th inning. His pitch count is high, but not dangerous. And he had a really good 7th inning, which, hey, that looked a lot like last year.
Well, and also too, guys, I mean, we've seen this a million times before where if you do let starting pitchers go way too long early in the season, they end up not being there at the end of the season. And I don't, they were making such a big deal against one of the pitchers against Chicago for throwing, over 100 pitches going into the 7th inning. And I'm just like, I don't know that makes a lot of sense for a game that is a marathon.
And these are also pitchers that threw an extra month. They threw more than, Phillies pitchers threw more. They had a harder road to get but they threw more in October. They had less time to rest. So rest them a little more in April is really, it's a very understandable and good decision.
Yeah, and of course you're also seeing the same response to when them skipping to scheduled days off, and I'm just like that again. We saw that strategy worked out. Andy, Centerfield, it's the John Fogerty position. It's important. I am of the opinion that Chas McCormick never should have been anything but the starter. Are we at the point now where we can just say he is going to be the guy, or do you expect to keep seeing this weird mishmash of a sort of moving position for people?
I mean, what I want and what I expect to see are usually two different things. Like when I check my checking account. But I don't understand what Chas McCormick has to do to win the everyday job at this point. He is not an all-star level player. He is not a Hall of Fame, he's not an all-time great, but he is a solid player who hits left-handed pitching really, really well. And I think we've started to see over the last year and a half that when he starts seeing right-handed hitting or pitching on a consistent basis, he can still make contributions. As I mentioned in the opening, he is the OPS right now. He's at 874, getting on base 35% of the time and hitting the ball hard when he's hitting it. The platoon that we are currently apparently employing doesn't make a lot of sense to me, other than they're trying to give Jake Meyers every chance to get better at the major league level. My issue with the Meyers love, for whatever that is that if you look at their minor league numbers, here's where Jake Meyers has an advantage. He's a year younger than Chas McCormick. And he had a really good year in 2021 in AAA. Beyond that, and including those stats, their stat line in the minor leagues is, I think, within 40 points of OPS between the two players. They have remarkably similar minor league careers, except that Jake had a really, really good 2021 and continued that when he came up to the majors for that part of the season, up until he ran into a wall in Chicago. Since then, he apparently can hit at AAA. He can't hit in the majors. I've seen nothing that tells me it's going to get any better, because even when he does make contact, it's not with authority. There's no power behind it. His slugging right now is 214. He looks slow. He looks unsure of himself defensively, although he did have a good defensive weekend compared to the first couple of series. I just don't – he's a fourth outfielder that profiles more towards Jake Marisnick without power than a guy we should be arguing about why he's starting. But the Astros, for whatever reason, have decided that they want to give him a lot of opportunities to figure that out. I think this works itself out in the wash. I think by Memorial Day, you're going to see a lot more Chas and a lot less Jake. I just would like to get there sooner for the sake of both players, because to me, Jake Meyers is taking up a roster spot that Corey Julks could easily be filling, when we get to a full contingent. When Michael Brantley, let's put it this way, when Michael Brantley comes back in a month or whenever that is, I don't keep Jake Meyers on the roster.
Okay, yeah, or I mean, I know Brantley's due back soon. I suppose Lance McCullers will be back soon. Altuve's back by the end of May. Brian, did you have a different opinion on that? I tend to share Andy's assessment, but I'm just saying we score runs with Chas in there and we don't with Jake.
I have two thoughts. One is McCormick's played 7 of the 10 games, including 7 of the last 8. So I don't know why he didn't start the first 2 games of the season, but if you lop those off, he's a regular in the lineup. Jake has had 4 starts out of 10. That's pretty much fourth outfielder level production. I will say this, though. I'm low man on Corey Julks. Just because so far what we've seen, he was not a top prospect. He's ranked number 30, and he's hit a lot of singles so far, which has been really good, but he's got 1 double and no walks.
I want to get into some of that too with you. Let's just pivot there then, because you've also brought up a good point about not just Julks, but Yadier Diaz is not getting looked. What is up with that for you, where it does seem like, at least from the outside perspective, that they're giving McCormick and Meyers a chance, but yet we're having some guys brought up that aren't playing, and then you've got Julks, who for some reason is getting all the ABs.
Yeah, and so one is, it could be Dusty's evaluation that Julks, he does have a lot of power, and he is the fourth outfielder, and he's gotten he's gotten more starts than Meyers. And of course it's 10 games, so stats for any of these guys are a thimbleful of, they are. Corey Julks I think he hit 30 home runs in AAA last year. Now, some of those are in Albuquerque, where I think he hit, he probably hit 10 of them in 2 at-bats. But again, 30 home runs is 30 home runs, and other guys didn't hit that. So it could be he sees that. It could be, we never expect that. I didn't expect Corey Julks to make the team at any point, and wasn't really looking at him as I've looked at him since he's been here. Fine. Yadier Diaz, though, is one of the team's top prospects. He has problems playing, of course, because, the pitchers really love throwing to Martin Maldonado and have great confidence in him, and they want him for that. it's been hurt. I thought when they came up with 3 catchers, the idea was that Diaz would hit more as a DH, or I think on Friday they played Abreu as the DH, and I was really disappointed that Yiner didn't get the start at first base. Instead they went Hensley at first, Dubon at second. So I don't know. The good news is Diaz had a good game yesterday, and hopefully that gives Dusty more confidence that he can play him more. Because from the outside and looking at the stat line and, not understanding either the psychology, but also the more developed numbers that they're getting from the wearable devices and from putting monitors on the bats and the high-speed cameras, Diaz is a better hitter than Julks, and I'd rather see him and as the DH on day rather than Julks. But again, it's 10 games. These things can, like I said, I already think the McCormick thing's sorting itself out. And it could sort itself otherwise. And in the end, Michael Brantley's supposed to be back early part of May. One of those guys will go down then. And regardless, it's better to have Michael Brantley on the team than either one of those guys. So hurry back, Uncle Mike.
Well, and to me, the only thing that keeps Jake Myers on the lineup past Brantley's activation is that Julks can't play center field. And I don't know if that's true. I know nothing about Corey Julks other than he put up a few pinball numbers in AAA last year. But I will say I feel a whole lot better with him at bat than I do with Jake Myers just watching them this year so far. I do like that Corey has the weird anomaly of having a higher batting average than he does on base percentage, because that's not easy to do.
Yeah, no, it's some of those rosters. I think some of those roster decisions surprised all of us. The Salazar kid, for example, I had to Google making the team. Is that his last name anyway? I might have it wrong.
Yeah. I also think with Yonner, and this is just from years of watching the Astros, and they would never say this out loud, at least not while it's happening, but he played in, I think, the opening game or in the first 2 games, and then he didn't play for 4 or 5 games at all. That to me screams that he had some little nagging injury that they didn't want to aggravate and just didn't bother telling anybody about it, which is very on brand for the Astros medical staff. And if you ask Dusty questions about things like that, you just get yelled at. So
they don't. So they don't ask any of those questions. Andy, yesterday you ended up in a Twitter discussion about what the rotation will look like when Lance McCullers comes back. And you had made the case that Urquidy over Garcia. And considering on Saturday, the most obvious implosion was coming and came with Garcia. What were some of your thoughts on why you feel like Urquidy will have a spot or should have a spot over Garcia?
Well, I think starting that off, the idea was Lance McCullers Jr. was going to come back soon and get a spot in the rotation, and who gets removed out of that. Somebody else had said Garcia and left Urquidy out. And in my world, Brown is probably not your 5th starter. So we're really arguing about the 5th starter in a rotation at this point. But for me, Garcia has yet to fulfill his promise because he throws too many pitches to too many batters. He spends too much time nibbling, and whether you want to call that control or fear or whatever it is, he just doesn't go much past the 4th inning in most of his starts. And I think we looked sometime during spring training, right at like 58% of his starts are 5 innings or less. And that's taxing on a bullpen, especially right now when several other pitchers aren't going 5 innings as well. Right. Urquidy, for all his faults, and he gives up too many home runs, he works fast, he works efficiently, and he does pitch a lot of innings. It's not always pretty, but he profiles a lot more as a major league 5th starter to me because he does throw innings, and he doesn't nibble, and he's just more interesting to watch to me than Garcia. Garcia has a lot more potential than Urquidy. I think he has a lot more talent than Urquidy, but Urquidy does more with what talent he does have than Garcia has to this point. Garcia is still young, so it's not I want to cut him or trade him or DFA him, which is the Astros Twitter mantra for everybody that doesn't do well. but he's got to figure out how to take that next step and get more efficient with the way he pitches. And it just to this point hasn't happened. And it's not this year or just basing it on last year, but it's the 4 years he's been up. It's just consistent that it's very difficult for him to go past 5 innings. And after a while, that wears on your bullpen. I mean, you would talk about why we're seeing a sluggish start for the Astros. I think the biggest thing to me is that your starters aren't pitching the number of innings we were expecting them to pitch, which puts more of a burden on your bullpen. And, as I say probably too often on this show, bullpen guys are bullpen guys for a reason. And
Right.
the more you see them and the more they have to work, the worse they are. I think that more than anything, if you want to fix the Astros, get your starters to go 6-7 innings a start, and your bullpen looks a whole lot better, and you win a lot more games.
Brian, what about you? I mean, to me, I sort of lean in agreement with Andy, which I'm shocked at because beginning last year, I think I would have been completely in on Garcia over Urquidy in the rotation. Where are you in all of that?
I think it's way too early to have to make a decision on that. Lance McCullers hasn't even started a rehab appearance. And if we recall from last year, Lance McCullers saying really optimistic things about when he comes back is a daily theme of afternoon Astros Twitter, because, Lance is often talking to the media, and they're real happy to talk to him. He's one of the few players who's really outgoing in that. So, and he's a pretty optimistic guy, which I have no problem with that. I just calibrate what he says. So Lance isn't going to be back for several weeks. So I'm hoping Garcia rights himself in the next several weeks.
And I disagree with Andy, though, on one thing. I do think Brown is the 5th starter. I think regardless.
I'm higher on Brown than probably a lot of people. I think that it's, again, a situation where we're going to have patience, because he's going to have starts like yesterday where he looks really, really good. And he's going to have starts like his first start where he's really frustrating. That's a young pitcher. That's what they do. Very few of them come and dominate every start. But I think as we go on, there's going to be a lot more of the good days than there are of the bad days. And frankly, pitching in 2023, that's about what you can ask for now. It's not, we don't live in 1968. With a lot of good things, we don't live in 1968, but pitchers were better pitchers then. Right now, you kind of take what you get, and the Astros still have a much better situation than the majority of the Major League Baseball teams they face.
Yeah. The last thing I just want to see happen to Brown is what happened to Javier all those years, where he bounces back and forth, and now he's in the bullpen. I don't think that does anything, does any good for anything. I think Urquidy or Garcia could be more valuable.
I'll slightly disagree with you on that point, which is that it's unclear to me that Brown is built up to throw 180 innings in the majors, and he may need some time in the bullpen to be effective, to be more effective over the course of the season. And if we expect him to pitch in October and start games in October, which is what they should be planning for until like September 1, I think everyone's healthy, I'm fine with that. It's a balancing act on all of this. And again, we'll see. We may have too many starters at one point. That's a nice problem to have if we ever have it.
Yeah, and we obviously had it last year. One of the things I was going to talk about, because obviously Astros Twitter wants Jose Abreu. Actually, they want both Abreu's gone now, but they want Jose Abreu because even though he has all the hits this year, he doesn't have a lot of RBI because, well, in part, no one's on base in front of him, either because they're not hitting or because Alvarez is knocking them all in. So let's talk about Alvarez, though. This has got to be one of the best starts y'all have ever seen in your career as watching this team, right? This has been why anybody throws anything to this guy to hit. I have no idea. Andy?
Yeah, I'm still stuck on the Abreu thing. You mentioned both Abreu's. Brian Abreu has struggled this season, right? He's roughed up and not doing well. 1.59 ERA.
I know.
6 WHIP. He's not pitching poorly.
Hold on. He had a 0 ERA during the postseason, and I expect that every single outing now.
Meanwhile, Ryan Stanek seems to be made of Teflon, and his numbers are starting to. Well, let's just say he doesn't have the lowest ERA on the team anymore.
You know, it's interesting, and not to cut you off, but his numbers are starting to reflect the secret numbers that Brian was talking about.
Yeah.
Why he didn't pitch in the playoffs.
100%, because reality is reality. You can fool it for maybe a season, but it just comes back.
To repeat what I said last October, you're in good shape if he's your fifth best reliever on your team, but he is the fifth best reliever on this team, and it's good to figure that out.
100%. And I'm not worried about Jose Abreu. We knew his power numbers were going to be down, but he gets hits. And eventually there will be men on base. Eventually Alex Bregman won't be batting 150. Altuve will be back. Brantley will be hitting in front of him. Alvarez can't hit everything, although maybe he can. He to me is, there's very few players in my life of watching baseball baseball is usually on in my house during the season, and I will casually watch games. And he's one of the few players that I will just stop what I'm doing and watch his at bats, because even when they're not successful, which, still 60% of the time, it's still, he has such an incredible approach. He's very rarely fooled, and covers everything. And, if he makes contact, it's going to go a long, long way really fast, really hard. And so it's just, I think he's not even in his prime yet physically, which is interesting. I think he's still battling a hand injury, which is interesting. I don't know that his knees are 100%, which is interesting. If he ever got to the point where he was fully healthy, he's a better player than Aaron Judge. And I know, any of our non-Astros fans that are going to watch this are going to tell me I'm insane, because Jordan Alvarez doesn't play in New York, so of course he's not better than Aaron Judge. He's a better player, and I'm a lot more afraid, if I was a pitcher, of Jordan Alvarez coming up in a game-winning situation than I am of Aaron Judge at this point in their careers. And I think that's probably true of just about anybody, maybe short of Juan Soto, in Major League Baseball right now.
Scott Service definitely agrees with you.
Yeah, Scott Service. No, and the fact is that Aaron Judge strikes out and Jordan Alvarez really doesn't. So, speaking of, as we wrap up, our friends north of the border, north of our border, Andy, they're already celebrating the World Series run just like they did last year. Why don't they learn? Like last June, they had Fox predicting 120 wins. Brian, it almost seems like they're ready for the same story to happen to them again.
Jim, I don't know if you will, I'm sure you will appreciate this. You may not like this. Yankees fans are to baseball what Longhorn fans are to college football. Every year they're back. And every year at the end of the season, somehow they're not, and it is a total and complete disaster. Sark 2024.
Okay. I mean, I think they're a lot more obnoxious than Longhorn fans, but that's fine. That's fair. Andy, you're going to bite your tongue over there.
I thought we were talking about the Rangers when you said north of our border.
No, I think the Rangers, there are like 1-4 since Rosenthal had that column about how they might be the heir apparent for the AL West, but whatever.
Yeah, the AL West is interesting. Is anybody going to beat Tampa Bay? I mean, that's the story so far in Major League Baseball.
According to Yankee Twitter, they're playing minor league teams.
Sure.
A, that's actually true, but B, to go to a college football analogy, Georgia really whipped up on its non-conference opponents last year's too, as well as its conference opponents. So,
Right.
Well, it's Yankees fans being Yankees fans, God love them, but their shortstop star of the future evidently needs to be DFA'd. I saw that over the weekend because Volpe is washed already. They've been waiting for this kid to come up for the last 3 years. They've been talking about him, and now that he's up, they don't like him. That will change the first time he gets a game-winning RBI. That's just part of that fan base. I'm actually going to a Yankees game next week, so that'll be fun to see. what that's like in person. They'll be playing the Angels, so I'll be rooting for no one.
Yeah. You're rooting for the meteor.
Maybe. I'll watch Ohtani play in that what is it, Little League left porch. Early season results are what early season results are. I don't think anybody would be expecting Pittsburgh to be 6-3 and us going into Pittsburgh today at 4-6. I don't expect those results to hold. I don't expect any of the AL West standings to hold where they are, where Houston and Seattle are both sitting at 4-6 right now, and the Angels and Rangers are leading the way. My friends in Atlanta will call out Ashland again. She's apoplectic. The Braves are 6-4, and they seem to be leading that division. The Mets spent another $1 billion over the offseason. They're 5-5. Arizona is the worst team in baseball. They're sitting at 6-4. So all that's to say, just like we said last week, it's really, really early, and none of this matters yet.
And if you get to Pittsburgh, Brian, and you pull off a sweep, which I think should be, with the way the rotation lines up, should be well within a reasonable possibility. You come back, you're over 500, you get to start again.
Possibly so, yeah. I mean, and regardless, it's a long season, 162 games. So even if they have a bad week this week, well, it'll be a problem because while Andy's coming to New York, I'm coming to Houston this weekend. So going to have tickets to all 3 games against the Rangers with a bunch of my high school friends. So
well,
in those games, guys, it'll make me feel better.
Well, at least on Wednesday, the Astros face our old friend Rich Hill. So that should cure whatever might be ailing the Stros. But that does wrap us up.
This time, when you say the 5th, they'll have to bring the wheelchair out for him, and hopefully he won't be as mad as he was during the 2017 World Series.
I was about to say, when you say our old friend, you're literally saying our old friend Rich Hill, because he's what, 55?
55, yeah. He's an old man.
I'm turning 50 later this month, and it's encouraging to know that I could, like Rich Hill, I could still make the majors.
Getting that AARP card is not the end of your life, Brian.
No, I was able to turn it into teaching material.
There you go. There you go. All right, guys, that does wrap us up for this week. We're actually going to have a special Go Astros on Thursday, which is going to be a repurposed edition of Let's Get To, where I'm going to reflect on this 6-year run. But I've also got a fun conversation with our friends Emily Nyman, Gary Warren, and and my buddy Alex, Yankee fan, Dodger fan, Cardinal fan, talking about what it was like to win a World Series in our lifetime. So it should be fun. Until then, we'll see you guys with the 3 of us back next Monday. Go Stros.
Go Stros.
War Phil Matan and his 0 ERA. Go Stros.